Welcome to the podcast, which is all about the world of direct response. Are we on the air? I'm your host, Shawn, and for over 30 years, I've hosted shows on cable shopping networks, and now I want to be your guide into this world as we look at the ever-changing nature of these industries. And the show that we did previous to this one, if you haven't listened to it yet, please go do so, because a lot of what I'm going to mention kind of ties back to what we were talking about in the last show, which was all about when hosts leave networks, and why they do, and some of the things that might cause a host to leave the industry. That show, by the way, has had more reaction than any show I've done in a very long time. In podcasting, it's not about ratings, it's about downloads, and that, we can see those numbers. That is easily the most heavily downloaded show in the first 7 days of anything that I've done since the Shop HQ bankruptcy show back in 2023. So a lot of interest in this topic, and there's been a lot of comments and a lot of response to some of the things that were discussed, a lot of private messages and people commenting on various forums. But one of the things that was brought up, actually a couple of things that this ties into, and one of the topics that I brought up was burnout. People look at a TV shopping show, they see a host, and they say, wait a minute, works 3 or 4 hours a day. How can you get burned out from that? Well, we'll discuss that. And again, in some networks, you have 5 hours a day. Some, like Gem Shopping, you're doing 7-8 hours a day straight. So that probably right there could be one indication. But anyway, we'll get there. By the way, later on, stick around, because near the very end, I'm going to go over my list of who I think really are the rock star hosts these days. This will be my opinion. That's going to get me in a lot of trouble, but my opinion as to who some of the rock star hosts are. How many do I have on the list? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and an honorable mention. Where was I? Okay, so the burnout factor, because on paper it looks like they do a 3 or 4 hour shift. Now, it used to be QVC had a rotating wheel, 4-hour shifts, so 6 hosts a day. Home Shopping had 3-hour shifts, so you would have 8 hosts a day, and you just did 3 hours straight through. It's kind of like talk radio. And again, I think it goes back to the radio origin of all of this. 3 hours, on-air shift, great, you're done. Which is fantastic, because it's non-stop, and it's high energy. I tell people all the time, even if I'm working, because I do 2 shifts a week that are prime time, so I'm done at 11 o'clock, I get home about midnight, I can't just go right to bed. It takes my brain hours to calm down and to stop functioning, because your brain is constantly working. I'm used to that. Some people can't handle that, and that's enough burnout factor right there. But there's so much more that goes into the job than just 3-4 hours a day. So before anyone thinks that they want to get into this, because I still have people say, how do I get into this? I'm interested in it, especially people that are leaving the news industry. For those that don't know, the news industry, broadcasting local news, it's collapsing. The money is not there. Advertising revenue is in the toilets. In fact, I had to laugh. One day, a couple weeks ago, the announcement came out that 5 veteran anchors and reporters from one station in San Antonio suddenly were announcing their retirement at the same time. Next day, 5 veteran anchors and reporters from a Houston station, same ownership, were suddenly announcing their retirement. People are getting out of that industry like crazy. And television shopping is something that, honestly, many reporters and anchors have had some success at. So there is precedent for that. Remember, what we do is all ad lib. But let me get back to the day in the life of a host, because it doesn't begin. You don't just show up and immediately you're on air. A good host is going to get to work 2 hours before their shift, minimum. And in most cases, it's mandatory. QVC, HSN, you're there 2 hours minimum before your shows, because there's a lot of prep that's involved. In fact, the prep for a show starts weeks, in some cases months in advance. So there's a lot of planning ahead. Right now as we record this, it is July. I promise you there's planning already going on for the holiday season right now as to what products are going to be presented and when. That's the kind of lead time there is on successful networks. Now, there's a good argument to be made that pivoting at the spur of the moment can also be successful, and I've seen that work. So if all of a sudden we have a closeout buy on something, and wow, we're getting that on the air tomorrow, you give that host a crash course in whatever it is, they'll learn about it. But anyway, So there's a lot of meetings and there's a lot of spending time with buyers. If you know that you have let's say you have a clothing show 1 week from today, you immediately start talking to your buyer about what product have you bought, what's going to be in the show, what kind of things are coming. Skincare even more important because there's so much to learn. And a good host, I believe, again, my opinion, a good host has a natural curiosity to it. I am a sponge. I want to absorb everything about everything. And my biggest fear, in fact, and I've had it happen, is going into a show and you realize 5 minutes in, I'm not prepared. That is one of the biggest holy moments you can possibly have because you realize I'm stuck here now for 2 hours with a guest and I'm not prepared. And that's when you panic. And I have watched hosts, and I cringe, saw a host in a pre-show with a guest. So literally, it's like, okay, I'm on air with this guest in 45 minutes. Knew nothing about the product. It was skincare. Had never talked to the buyer about this product. Sat down, and they're meeting with the guest before the show involved. So tell me 3 things about this I should know. Yeah, good luck making a successful show out of that. Proper show prep begins the moment you know you have that show. And in some cases, it can be a day ahead of time. In some cases, it can be hours ahead of time, depending on if the network's pivoting because of sales or not. It is on the host. It's not on anybody else. It's on the host to get ahead of it. Talk to the buyer, talk to anyone that they need to. So for the hosts that go into this, and unfortunately, there have been a lot of them that think it's a 3-hour gig. It's not a 3-hour gig. It's not a 4-hour gig. It's an 8-hour day. There's a lot that goes into it at home. COVID changed a lot of things. A lot of the meetings and the prep that you used to have, you have on Zoom now, and that's fine. Some of that will never change. But there's nothing like you have the meeting with your buyer, you have the meeting with your guest, get to know them a week ahead of time or a month ahead, whatever it is, and then that same day, you finalize the plan before you go on the air. So it's literally hours. And for a high-profile show, it's even more than that. Karen Connolly and I did a Norel show. Which, funny backstory, because I can share this now because the people are no longer there. 2 of the executives that were at the network, this was Shop LC at the time, I don't want to say were resisting it, but really didn't think that this was going to succeed that well. And they gave us the Saturday morning 9 to noon slot to make this show work. Karen and I brainstormed this for weeks on end. How we wanted to execute it, how we wanted to do it, how we wanted the set to look. We had meetings with set designers. Karen went out and bought an evening gown. I got my tuxedo pressed. I mean, it just, everything was as we envisioned it. Steve Bryant talked about this in a past show. Go back and listen about how many times it's on the host to come up with these ideas because you know what's going to work. Not only did the show succeed, they extended it an extra hour. So this show they didn't even want to do to begin with. We made work, and they told us live during the show, can you do an extra hour? Well, this is what we told you. I literally just this morning was listening to an interview with Chuck Woolery, the game show host, and he was talking about a moment he had with Lucille Ball back at NBC. When he and Lucille became good friends, and she was doing a big special for NBC, and she walked out into the studio before the show and immediately said, okay, light me, get all the lights up, and immediately had a monitor brought out, started changing everything. Nope, those lights are all wrong. 30 minutes just working on lighting. And he just kind of stood back and watched this because even though there are producers and there's directors and all these people behind the scenes, she knew what worked. She knew what would make it a success and make her look good. So it's that kind of ownership that a good host takes to make a show a success. If you walk in minutes before the show expecting it, and again, I've seen this. I have seen, back when we used to sell telephones. Nobody sells telephones anymore. I literally watched a host come in 5 minutes before her show, grab the box for the telephone, and her whole presentation was basically just reading what was on the box. Obviously, it wasn't a success. So there's so much work that goes into prepping a successful show. You don't just sit down with your guest, 15 minutes before the show and say, tell me 3 things about your product. And by the way, that show bombed, as you might expect. It's knowledge, it's information, it's research, and many times it's on the host to do that. I've heard so many hosts say, I was never sent anything about this. Well, did you do any of your own research? You know, it used to be you had to, find books and research publications. Now you go online, you research the item. It should take 10 seconds to find a website that's going to tell you about it. So there's a lot of research that goes into being a good host. The day of the show, that is when you put your final notes together, make your final plans, and go into hair and makeup as it exists or doesn't exist anymore. Some networks have gotten rid of hair and makeup. Again, COVID changed a lot of that. Hosts became responsible for their own hair and makeup, and the companies realized, okay, we're saving some money by not paying people to come in and do hair and makeup. So that exists and yet doesn't exist at the same time, which, by the way, I'm going to go off topic a lot, I have a feeling. There is one host in particular that I have seen lately, and she does late nights, who looks like she has spent probably 2 hours in hair and makeup. And for her, it works. I ordinarily would say that's too much because you have to relate to the customer. That time of night, for her, it works. If she was on at 10 in the morning, I would say that doesn't work. And that goes back to, again, host being in the right time slot, which we discussed on the last show. So you don't overdo the hair and makeup. And same thing with clothing. Again, kind of getting off topic a little bit. Best advice I ever got from one of my bosses was, and he had been a producer back at Good Morning America, and so he was a real deal. He was an executive producer. Came to Shop NBC, and this was when Regis was hitting it big with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and he was doing all the monochromatic suits. I feel like I might have told this story before, but listen to it again. And I said to him, what do you think about that look for me? And he said, absolutely not. I said, why? You as a host always need to be a few seasons behind the styles because that's the average person. That is how the average person dresses. There is a male host on one of the networks that I see wearing clothing that is so out there and so overly stylish, let's call it. His sport coats, everything. It's just, that's not the customer. That's not the viewer. It might be great if you're going out with your friends on a Friday night, but it's not television appropriate. Rick Domeyer, who I'll be mentioning on my list here in a little bit, is almost always casually dressed because it fits the products he's selling. But you see him in a suit, he's doing jewelry, and he does jewelry on occasion. So he knows how to dress for the show. And the suits are always just nice, traditional, conservative suits. So and by the way, this does come part of the host responsibility is, looking the part. And, you have a lot of considerations that you have to think about going into that. Now, let me get to one of the other things. As I was talking about, get there early, obviously part of the job. And this is going to sound stupid, but it's one of the most frustrating things to learn initially is how to measure an item. Because remember, when you look at a television monitor, we're seeing what you see at home. If you're holding something up to a mirror, your mind instantly comprehends what you're looking at. It's a reflection. When you see the monitor, it's what they're seeing at home, so it's kind of the opposite of what your brain thinks it's supposed to be. I say this all the time to new hosts. Don't fret over it. It's one of the hardest things you can do is learn how to measure an item. A good host has a conversation, does not ask questions, and this also goes back to listening to people. Anytime I have a new guest, one of the first things they're going to say to me is they're nervous to begin with. They're going to say, what are you going to ask me? What are you going to ask me? And my response is always the same. This is not Q&A. This is not an interview. We're going to go out and have a conversation. And that is how you have the best success. You make it a conversation. This is not Larry King sitting down asking you questions. There's a lot more pressure if you go into your shows with your guests that way. Are there times where you have to do that? Yes. But otherwise, it's about having a conversation. An example, let's say I have a skincare line. And this skincare has, making something up off the top of my head, vitamin L. Never had this before. Vitamin L. First skincare to ever have vitamin L. The wrong approach would be to look at the guest and just straight out say, what's vitamin L? I've never heard of it. And that's how most people would handle it. It's more Q&A there. The way I would approach it is I would say, man, you know what? I got to say, this vitamin L is amazing. Stop. It's a conversation then. The guest, if it's a good guest, is going to pick up on, because you've just teed them up. to use the business term. You just set them up for the conversation. Oh, you're right, Shawn. Vitamin L is fantastic. I discovered this, blah, 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 blah. So you make it a lot more conversational. And it's not as confrontational as just straightforward Q&A. Now, if they're not picking up on the hints, if I say, wow, this vitamin L is just amazing, and they say, I invented this back in 2005. It's like, okay, you did not get the hints. So then, as a good host, you have to pivot and say, we are going to go about this in Q&A, because you have to. It's just they're not getting the hints. And that is an art, the art of conversation, that a lot of people don't have. It's a lost art, and it's not just in this industry, it's in every industry. I've watched reporters interview people. Katie Couric's my favorite example, and it's a tragic situation. It was after a school shooting on the Today Show. She was interviewing a parent of someone, asked a question, the guest gave an answer, and then they elaborated, and then Katie's very next question, they had just answered with their elaboration to her previous question. So she looked stupid. She put the parents in an awful spot, because now, they're having to, say, well, as I just said, and it was an awful moment for everyone involved. So you have to be a good listener. And that goes back to the host role of realizing the product is the star, your guest is the star, you step back, you're a nobody for most of this. We're all replaceable. Everybody's replaceable. And so there's a lot of this that a host either has or doesn't have. A lot of things can be learned, some things can't. And if you have the curiosity and if you have a good conversational aspect of things, you're going to be a great host. And a lot of hosts realize somewhat into this, man, this is a lot tougher than it looks. I just can't do all these little things. And that's where some of that burnout can be. I mentioned the outside of the on-air roles. A good network does tape reviews. I hope they're still doing them. To me, those were the most beneficial things. When you sat down with your boss, providing you had a good boss, and they sat with you and you watched your shows in real time. Every host hates this. Hates sitting down, watching their shows, and then getting evaluated. I learned more from those moments than anything I ever could have imagined. You think you know it all? You think, I got this. I know how to do this. No. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for critique. I don't like it when they say, well, the host can self-evaluate themselves. No host has ever sat down, watched themselves, and said, yeah, I'm doing fine. Or excuse me, every host does that. They don't criticize themselves. They need someone to critically sit down and tell them, hey, you know what? Why'd you do this? And that's the question you ask. Why did you do this? Why did you say this? Why did you do this here? And speaking of saying things, it goes back to words. Sign of the times, maybe. I know, I'm an old fuddy-duddy. Fine. I'm a professional broadcaster, at least I hope that I am, and it's why I've succeeded all these years. And it's why the Bobby Rays and the Mary Beths and all of these with longevity have succeeded, because they don't invent words. Giftability is not a word. Gifting is even in a gray category. I hear words being invented all the time now. And this, I think, goes back to maybe the fact they're not doing tape reviews anymore, because it's a good boss would have sat someone down and said, stop with the giftability. It ruins your credibility. Made a joke, didn't mean to. And it just, you don't sound like a professional broadcaster anymore when you're doing things like that. And there's so much of it happening. So that is something, again, you have to learn. You have to take the time to learn these things, whether it's studying grammar, whether it is studying whatever. I have literally, in the studio I record this in my home, I have above me shelves of books that I've accumulated over the years about grammar usage, sales techniques, obviously, good broadcasting techniques. I mean, it's a library that I have, and I've moved it every time I've moved, because you never know when you're going to need to make reference back to these. I have a, where is, I don't even know if I have it. There it is. Hang on. This is, I bought this in Canada, the CBC Radio Style Guide. Even books written for Canadian broadcasters, there's things you learn from. Unnecessary words, for instance. Off to a good start. Unnecessary words. Has been critical of unnecessary words. In the event that, unnecessary words. So it's these little things that you as a host have to learn yourself that can give you longevity because you sound more professional. Am I perfect? Hell no. But I'm a lot better off because I've done things like this and taken the time on my own. Because there's a lot of people, unfortunately, in this role that just think it is a 3-4 hour job and, well, it works great with my schedule. The job's not supposed to work great with your schedule. It's supposed to be something you do because you have a passion for it. Carmela Richards, my day one, said, you will develop a passion for this industry and it's all you want to do. That was day one, she told me. I never understood it until I've been doing it a few years. And if you don't have that passion, then you're not going to have that longevity in this industry. And for some people, that's fine. Whoops, hang on, where did my notes go? I had to, and I'm skipping over some things because we're already 20 minutes and I knew this was going to happen. Get creative, and again, this goes back to what we said before about you have to take it upon yourself. The Norell event I mentioned back when I was at Shop NBC, I had a 2-hour CZ show that I knew was going to be a disaster. And sometimes as a host going into this, you know that it's going to be a disaster. Now, I could have just done nothing but complain. I could have just said, you know what, this is going to stink, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, you know what? Let's find a way to make it work. And at the end of the day, that's where sales begins. If every host was given new product with low prices, there's no salesmanship involved. There's a term in this industry, goes back to the 80s, called a German Shepherd. This item is a German Shepherd. And what that means is you could take this item, put it in the mouth of a German Shepherd, put that German Shepherd on television, and it will sell. It's such an obvious good deal. If every item was a German Shepherd, we wouldn't need hosts. Salesmanship begins when you have to start thinking, how am I going to make this work? So anyway, I had the CZ show, 2 hours worth. Total disaster waiting to happen. Thought, you know what? I'm going to make this an event. People love events. And they love being invited to events. So for a week, I started again. This is using words. I started saying, I want to invite you to a special event that we have coming up Friday night, midnight, whatever it was. And I, again, mentioned tuxedo, got on my tuxedo. I didn't just open the show sitting at the desk. I made an entrance from behind the set. We made it an event. And the show did very well, blew away its goals. But again, this is the responsibility. If every buyer and every marketer and every buyer's assistant and everything had all the time necessary to do this, but they don't. And so that's why, as Steve Bryant mentioned on a previous show, he was having to do a lot of these things himself. In the early days of QVC, to this day, a lot of the good hosts still have to do it. You have to take it upon yourself to make things an event, to make things special. And if a host doesn't put the time into doing all of these things, then they're not necessarily going to be the most successful person in the world. I mentioned I was going to go over my list of who I think is really good. I want to play one piece of audio first because this, you know what, I don't have time. Well, let me do this. It's a quickie. Because this is everything old is new again. I've been saying for a while, these old tricks like price games need to make a comeback. Well, HSN recently did about as close to a price game as I've heard in a very long time with Colleen Lopez, who, by the way, is not officially a host there anymore. She's not on their host page. But she had this ring that she apparently had made, and, well, she's wrapping up the cell on some jewelry cleaner. I want to show you. I was promising you my Tucson treasure ring, and I'm going to pull these off here so I can show them to you real quickly. So the Tucson treasure ring comes in a beautiful little, this is our version of a little blue box, and inside the little blue box, you're going to get a little blue satin pouch. By the way, no graphics on the screen, so no one has any idea what's going on. She's opening the box. You haven't seen the item yet. She's opening the pouch. Again, this was probably her idea to do this. And inside the pouch, you have your choice. We have Appetite. We have... Now we're seeing the rings. Gorgeous Appetite. We have beautiful multicolored tourmaline, and we have Tanzanite. Your choice. Are you ready for this? We might still have a handful left in grape garnet. Okay, you ready? What are we thinking? Like $149? Be great. $99? Yes. $79? Amazing. $59 would be ridiculous. Look what we're doing. This is my treasure. This is the Tucson treasure, and it is a treasure to behold. No, that's not right. That's... By the way, this was a little blooper, which she wasn't expecting. Again, probably because her crew's not used to doing these kind of things. Instead of putting up the graphic for the ring, they put up the graphic again for the jewelry cleaner. So, which was a lot less money than the rings. But Colleen did a brilliant job setting that up. That's classic price game. It's just they didn't have the graphic on the screen dropping the price every time she said a new price.
The Prestige, they just scared me. That's the Prestige graphic, so it's not $24.98, but it's close. Here, we'll pop it up for you. It's under $40. Check this out, under $40.
Taking the old graphic off, here's the right one.
$39. It's a 7-stone band, genuine apatite. Gorgeous, rare purple.
Brilliant. I was so happy to see that. I was so happy to see that. And so happy to see Colleen. She's one of those that is kind of retired now. She still comes back and does things, but she's not an official host anymore. So here we go. Here we go. Who do I think are the good hosts these days? My opinion. HSN, easy. They've got a lot of good ones. But I think Sarah Anderson, adore. Absolutely adore. And mainly because she can sell anything and because she's down to earth. She has that girl next door personality. Marlo Smith, and I'm going to be the first to admit I was not a fan when she started there. She has grown on me so much. Same thing. Can sell anything, down to earth. Seems genuine. And a good host has to come across like they're genuine. Bobby Ray Carter, God love her. Almost 41 years now there. And again, can sell anything, any product. She, to me, is the gold standard for skincare. And I know QVC is, doing their own thing with skincare, but she is the best. Shop HQ Jen Vick. I've told Jen, you need to be a QVC. You need to get your demo tape to QVC. I think she loves Minneapolis. I don't think she'll ever leave and go there. At QVC, who do I like? Alberti, who does Saturday mornings, is great. And he, by the way, is a good example of a conversationalist. I've watched him a number of times with guests. Doesn't just do Q&A, doesn't ask the guests questions. He has a conversation. He will make a statement, they'll make a statement. He'll make another statement. It flows beautifully. You don't sit at dinner with your friends asking questions to get answers. It's a conversation. Jen Coffey does a wonderful job at QVC. Rick, I mentioned Rick earlier. He's another one that pivots well. In fact, I just posted some video of Rick doing the 50 and 50 tour in Minneapolis. Watch that video of him. Watch him today. He's a lot more high energy today. I think that's always been there, but they had him reel it in. However, when he's in a suit and he's doing jewelry, he reels it in and brings it down. So he, to me, will have a lasting credibility there. In an honorable mention, she's one of the newbies at QVC. I think you need to keep your eye on her. Vanessa, and I got to find her last name again. Bear with me. Herring, Herring. Vanessa Herring, relatively new, and one of those I think that has great potential. For the moment, I see her a lot on Q2. She needs a lot more prime time. I mean, she needs to be elevated to the main network in the primetime shows. She has a lot of potential. I think it's smart. Keep her on Q2 for a little bit, but I don't know. There's just something about her. I've always had this, not to brag, I sound like I'm bragging on myself, this whole damn thing, don't I? But I've always had this ability to just spot there's something there. My friend Brian became a very good friend, actually. I was in Kirksville, Missouri, of all places, Market 300. And he was the anchor for their evening news on the Kirksville, Missouri television station. I dropped him an email, and I just said, you know what, you're really good. What are you doing here in Market 300? And we became friends after this. And he said, honestly, I'm too young. I send tapes elsewhere, and people say, yeah, you're way too young. Well, he let his hair go gray, very young, and now he's in Miami, and he's working for News Nation, and he's doing amazing for himself. So, why did I bring that up? Oh, because television shopping is quickly becoming the other thing, where it's just youth, young, and Vanessa is young. I think she's the future, and she has a lot of potential there, so keep your eye on her. Okay, 30 minutes, that's enough. Play the music, let's get out of here. So, let's see. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss a show. Plus, you can listen to the archive of past shows. I hope you'll check me out on X, Facebook, and YouTube at Shawn Wilsey, and on Instagram at SWilsey. Thank you for downloading this edition of Are We on the Air?
Yes, I know, Travis. That's why we give such bargains.
Copyright 2024, King Bobby Productions, all rights reserved.